ex-prisoners. How is prison different to how we think prison is? Reception is when you are first sent to prison, and they spend about 3 months to classify you. This is the worst. Locked down almost every day, and all 4 levels of inmates are in the same place. A guy who is in prison for a DUI is celled with a guy doing life on a triple homicide. Once you get placed, it gets better and you can stay busy. As I explained on a post last week, the whole concept of don't accept gifts in prison is false. When you first get there with nothing but the state clothes, people in your pod come up and introduce themselves and usually ask if you need anything like soap or coffee. When I was first out of reception, a guy I never talked to before in my pod saw that I kept going to the yard to work out in my prison scrubs. After 2 weeks, he comes up to me and asked if I just came from reception. I tell him yes, I did. He says, "I have some clothes that should fit you. I'll bring them to your cell." He brought me 4 basketball shorts, 3 t-shirts, 2 beanies, and a pair of Nike running shoes. This was worth about $100. This was no small gift as people get murdered for a $10 debt. I offered the guy coffee or anything else I had to say thanks for the gift, but he wouldn't accept payment. I never even talked to the guy again. Prison is a community, and your cellies and podmates become your friends, neighbors, and family. People empathize with you because they know what it's like to be taken from their family, have wives leave them, or have their parents die while they can do nothing but listen to a phone call that they are dead. These inmates hug you and cry with you when you feel like giving up. A guy once related a story about how he received a phone call that his 14-year-old dog died while he was locked up. He was walking back to his bunk with tears streaming down his face when about 100 guys gave him hugs before he made it to his bunk. Prison sucks. I've seen murders. I've seen fights. I've been tear-gassed. But the amount of altruism and empathy that goes on would surprise most people who haven't seen it. If you have nothing, people make sure you are fed, have clothes, have soap and shampoo. They don't expect anything in return. They know what it is like to have nothing in prison and don't want others to go through it. I will close like I closed before because I think it sums it up well. Even in prison, you will see friendships, empathy, and love. I'm going to add this before I get a bunch of questions about it again. Yes, there are still people who get tricked into receiving gifts. These people are scared, and their ignorance allows it to take place. Other inmates will see this and even explain it to them. But there are options. You can fight the guy who is taking advantage, and maybe you win, or maybe you get your ass kicked, but that's the end of it. You can get moved off the yard, and even list people as known enemies, and the once on that list, you will never be at the same prison as them. In the 5 years I have done in jails and prisons, not once did I ever have someone give me something, seemingly for free, and then ask for payment. Nor did I ever see it happen to anyone. I am not a big guy, 5'10", 145 lbs, so it wasn't like I scared people. So, I'm sure it has happened, and does happen, but I have never seen it. Story 2. There is a huge difference between jail and even prisons. I spent 7 years in a max security, which is way different from medium security facilities. Depending on how much time you have determines which kind of facility you go to. With that said, it's not like the movies. Stay away from gambling, drugs, and gangs. You're pretty much left alone. Don't be stupid. You see something going down, turn around and walk away. Nobody likes witnesses, and if you're ever, and I mean ever, asked by a co as to what happened, you have no idea. You didn't see anything. The food sucks, but it didn't really hit me until I was close to coming home. Then it all tasted like sandpaper. Yes, you do have to stand up for yourself. But the biggest myth is to find the biggest guy and hit him. That's so stupid. It just means you'll probably get your ass kicked by the biggest guy, and PPL will know you're a moron. In a max, most of the people just want to do their time and be left alone. It's the young gangbangers trying to prove themselves that are the problems. But unless you're in a rival gang, it's usually nothing to worry about. Not many want to go to the box, so when you stand up for yourself, and are willing to prove it, they'll move on to easier targets. Oh, I forgot about friendly extortion. Those pretending to be your friends and suck you dry of everything you have. They'll spend all their money on cigarettes and try and bum coffee every morning. Story 3. Prison. Remember, 2 years plus a day. Sentence jail. Gradually 2 years less a day. I was in jail a few times. A lot of the people in there are really stupid, like fetal alcohol to the extreme. One of my roommates was out with friends, and they mugged this woman for her beer case. They left with it, but my roommate went back and raped her while she was unconscious. The moron did it in a downtown park in broad daylight. A cop saw him in the act and picked him up. Like I said, stupid. A lot of homeless people are in jail, especially in winter. 3 hots and a cot, as they say. Jail is easy if you're smart and know how to talk to people. You also have to realize, like I said, these people are borderline retarded, gang members, or they're homeless, in which case they most likely in for assault or theft. One guy in there when I was there got out, then was back in less than a week later. He did a B&E on a yearly carnival to steal money for booze and crack. He was caught by cops while he was looting them. Fights do happen a lot. One time, I stole the butter knife from my plate and flushed it down the toilet for fun. Instant paranoia for everyone. There is one set of crime that everyone hates. These people who do it get beat in the shower on the regular. They get raped and they get stabbed. I'm not going to tell you because this is pretty universal, and you damn well deserve it if you do this crime. Story 4. I've worked in a juvenile girls' and boys' prison. Here's some stories. Thoughts. I'm gay for the stay. It's something girls do. It seems to me that it tends to start when some tall, strong, big girl who comes in and gets it started. Once it gets started, it starts to become a problem, especially with juveniles. You get into statutory rape charges depending on ages of the offenders. We have cameras in the dorm. They don't care. There are schools for these kids with incredible teachers who approach their jobs like a true calling. There are also awful teachers who got kicked out of every other school. I can't think of a single kiddo who doesn't have a terrible story. Trauma, abuse, death, drugs, and so forth. These kids are broken and all seem to have ACE scores higher than 6. They want to do well, but they do not know what normal or healthy looks like. Hurt people. Same with kids. They give what they have. I have kids who were in the room when a loved one died in some painful way. Kids who were trafficked at young ages. Kids who trafficked other kids. The underbelly of generational poverty and fatherless homes is horrifying. The justice system is an efficient eating and killing machine. That is all it does. Kills futures. Eats lives. There is a ton of kids who find solace and radical changes when they come to faith. It's truly incredible to see some of the transformations. When kids don't have entertainment, they turn to messing with each other and adults as their entertainment. The kids will cuss you out, then tell you they love you. Story 5. Not an inmate, but former co. I worked a county jail instead of prison, so my experience is no doubt different than what inmates or COs experienced in state prisons. That being said, here's a few differences I saw from what I see on TV prisons. 1. The whole prison rape thing is not what it probably was years ago. Sexual assaults did happen sometimes, but they were pretty rare thanks to Priya. We cracked down hard on guys who did that, and every credible allegation was thoroughly investigated. That was a good deterrent. 2 things we didn't fuck around with: rape allegations and suicidal behavior. There was none that American history ex-Oz shit of slipping the guard a few dollars so he looks the other way while a gang runs a train on the new guy in the shower. Not anymore. 2. Inmates and COs generally got along and knew their places. Some COs were sadistic with the inmates, and some were too friendly. Some inmates would attack COs, and some would try to corrupt them. But generally, everything was pretty respectful. All things considered, I didn't fear inmates because we had a mutual respect. They knew I had a reputation for upholding the rules, but I was consistent, lenient when I could be, and I wasn't an asshole. I ran into quite a few former inmates when I was out on the street, and meetings were always friendly. 3. A lot of the guys in jail were not hardened criminals. They were petty criminals who couldn't get out of their own way and kept getting in trouble. I felt bad for a lot of them because the system doesn't make it easy for them to get out of that cycle. There were some terrible people in there who, if they were on fire, I wouldn't waste a squirt of piss to put them out. But there were other inmates I genuinely liked and hoped the best for. 4. The new guys were not fresh meat. Most guys who got locked up already had built up reputations on the street, and this was just their first time getting pinched. Contrary to what you see on TV, it was new guys who were usually the most hot-headed and violent inmates. They felt like they had something to prove, and they hadn't learned the mutual respect system between cause and inmates yet. Story 6. You don't want to owe anyone, but it's not really a problem unless you're buying drugs or gambling. If people see you're struggling, they will help you out. Food, clothes, coffee, even cigarettes, or a hit of whatever you're into drug-wise. With the rare exception of the truly crazy, it's a community and people look out for each other. I did 6 years, my best friend did 18 years. We both came from the same area and got out within half a year of each other. 99% of the people you meet up with in prison, you might be cool with while you're inside. But out in the real world, you'll want nothing to do with. They're also the super rare friendships that will last you the rest of your days. Most officers just want to do their 8 hours and go home. There are also, without fail, officers that feel it is their mission in life to ruin your day. Regardless of how you are behaving, what you were charged with, they will try to mess up your day. These are the officers whose shift you simply stay in your cell cube for. Read a book, take a shower, take a nap. Snitches get stitches is very real. I've seen some serious things. Murders, assaults, robberies. But if anyone ever asked, I didn't see a damn thing. I was listening to the radio with my eyes closed while laying on my bunk. No amount of questions or threats could change that, because they were the cops. There for 1/3 of the day. You had to stay there 24/7. If someone did something to another con, and they were in the wrong, it was handled by the other cons without going to the officers. Maybe they paid for the wrong monetarily. Maybe they got beat to hell. Occasionally, they got cut or stabbed up for a serious reason. It sounds really rough, but if you're a regular person with common sense and the ability to communicate effectively, you'll be fine in there. If your problem is impulse control issues, probably why you're in there to begin with, you're going to get into situations. What else are you looking to know? Story 7. After years as a social worker and some time in a teens lockdown, the phrase that I use most often to describe it is, they didn't learn that on Sesame Street. Every kid in a lockdown has a tragic case file attached to them, bar none. Sexual offenders that act out on others were all abused, often horrifically. Gang units are filled with hard cases who know nothing outside their limited, tragic lives. It's truly soul-sucking trying to help those kids want to be more. Kids in Crisis is beyond tragic to witness, and infinitely more destructive and despondent than anything you see in the movies. Some of these kids truly want to die, and will go to obscene lengths to make it happen. I've seen a kid with bloody fingers from prying screws out of his open ISO door so he could try and swallow and choke on them. Another girl got on a chair, punched through the ceiling, pulled down the wiring, and tried hanging herself. You know it's going to be a rough shift when you and the other guy on the wing share exasperated looks while you hold the girl's legs and waiting for other staff to arrive. All while she boxes your ears because you're interfering with her hanging. Every day you work is a reminder of how invisible these kids are and how few good resources are available. Good therapists and counselors aren't paid enough and burn out fast. With turnover, the biggest issue, and lots of staff around with not enough experience to be helpful. After a particularly rough week, I looked at a coworker and told him I thought I was done. He asked me the most poignant question I've ever been asked. Since you started, can you think of a single kid who's improved? That was my last day on the job, as the answer was a resounding no. In my experience, lockdowns of any type are places you put people that you want to forget about, and no matter how well-intentioned the staff may be, they're completely ineffective at rehabilitation of any kind. Americans simply don't care about inmates of any flavor, preferring to think of criminals as Disney-esque villains beyond redemption. And the worst part is the inmates all know this. So to answer your question, despondent. Lots of lost souls who know society doesn't value them, and the depression permeates the air almost as thickly as the smell of athlete's foot. Story 8. I can only speak for the state I was incarcerated in, and this varies a ton, but regardless of what you did, once you made it to medium custody or lower, nobody ever really got fucked with or hurt. sex offenders included. I never once feared for my life, and 99% of the time I never feared for my health for the 8 years I did. People allow themselves to become victims of things like extortion or bullying daily, though. Sometimes it turns into fights, usually not. Prison is basically high school without the other gender. Story 9. I hated prison, and while I was miserable there, I still found things to joke about. I still laughed, and I still helped people whenever I could. That's just the kind of person I am. There were days when my heart was crying on the inside, but I still got up and went to the day room to hang out. I went to rec to work out sometimes 4 times a day. I did aerobics. I loved it, and it helped me feel better about myself. On the outside, I seemed happy, but on the inside, I was hurting. I never been as miserable as I was in prison. But humans are survivors. You do what you gotta do to get through it. You can sit in your cell all depressed, or you can make the best of a bad situation. I chose to be happy and make the best of the situation. I now know that I'm a strong person to have been able to stay positive on the outside and not let others see me crumbling on the inside. I was able to make others laugh and be happy just as I do at home. I look at it as a learning experience. It's a life that most people will never understand, but it's a part of my life that makes me who I am today. It was during that time that I knew if I could survive prison, I could beat my violent pornography addiction. I'm tough. Story 10. Husband went to Tuberville prison for a year. Told me he saw someone shove a broomstick up another person's ass. There's some stuff he's yet to tell me. That place is a shithole when I visited him. He looked like a Holocaust survivor. His head was shaved. He wore an ugly-ass orange jumpsuit, and he lost weight. He told me there were bugs in the grits. It didn't work that summer. They sleep on concrete. They let him withdraw cold turkey off of his Zoloft antidepressant and had seizures in his cell. Just awful. Thank God his mama was able to put so much money on his commissary, or no foods or phone calls for him, which is expensive, Afe. People trade those ramen squares and honey buns like they're gold. He came home and was still making those setups. God forbid he were to ever have to go back to prison. He said he'd let the cops shoot him, it's that bad. Edit. Oh yeah. Also, you pretty much have to fight when you get there. Unless you know someone, which thankfully he did. That person ended up protecting him from some fights. So it's to be expected. You will be picked on, and people will try to steal your foods and commissary. Story 11. Not a prisoner, but former CO. There are good and bad in everyone. I remember so clearly I had an inmate tell me one time, I won't pick up your good habits, but you sure will pick up mine easy. I was a female CO in a men's prison and had lifers to small-time crooks, or even some DUIs that got bad lawyers. I will tell you that. Until you are in it, you cannot understand. I got to pull my 8 and hit the gate. But let me tell you this as a fact. There were COs that were the biggest POS on earth. And there were inmates I trusted with my life. If I were assigned to the lifers' dorm, I knew for a fact I could walk in there, and not one of them would disrespect or hurt me. They could have, easily. But it's a code. Guys who have no friends or family on the outside hustle to make some money to buy canteen, fix radios, etc. When I do a shakedown, I look over it. They aren't hurting a soul by doing that. It's their only way to live. Gambling was a big no-no, but on the weekends when it was a little more relaxed, as much as a prison can be, as long as I can't spot your hawkman and the day room is clean and no cash money on the table, play away. Respect humans, we all EFF up. I have seen major drug dealers who were very much still connected make sure that a fellow inmate's son get the medical treatment he needed to live. Quiet and low-key, but damn if he didn't save that kid. Prison is a hard place to be, but they aren't all soulless in there. Just saying from a CO's viewpoint. Story 12. A guy I knew described it as, imagine hanging out all day with people you don't want to hang out with. Watching TV shows you don't want to watch and then eating shitty food. Again, with people you don't want to eat with. Story 13. Not as much rape as everyone thinks there is. People generally prefer prison to jail, because in jail, you're in a pod 24/7. You're not supposed to be there long term. If you keep your head down and mind your business, you will do all right for the most part. Like on the streets, having a sense of awareness and a sense of humor, or being good with people is gonna get you a long way. People generally aren't going to start problems with you, But you gotta watch out for the hustlers who are always working an angle. Again, not getting caught up in drama will keep you out of the mix. Guys I've seen taken advantage of are either really dumb and naive, or trying to impress people doing dumb shit. Source: investigator for 20 years. Spend a lot of time in jails and prisons doing interviews. Story 14. It's not as bad as you would think. I gambled and dealt drugs. I was very blessed with people around me who cared about me, and was lucky. I was in the joint for 9 months, and yes, the food sucks ass. Except the last one I had, before I left. Don't get involved with gangs. Do productive stuff. I personally tutored people who were younger and didn't have jeds. Kept me out of trouble. Think of it as a sleepaway camp for pieces of shit. If you gamble, pay your debts, and don't fight. Can't tell you how many people who earned more time for fighting on camera. Take that shit to the restroom. Wouldn't wish that shit situation on my worst enemy. Good luck if you might go, or are there already. God bless. Story 15. Not an inmate, but I bought a course for about a year in a high-security prison in my state. It was a course that was 2 weeks at a time, and if the inmates completed it, they earned 5 days of good time, meaning they would be released from prison 5 days earlier than their actual release date. From my interactions with most, they were eager to take the course, both because it gave them something to do, but obviously because they also earned good time. Some actually genuinely seem to care about the course and want to better themselves. I always figured that because they're bored, it gives them an outlet to learn something new that might be foreign to them. It was a fantastic experience. Story 16. I don't think this entirely answers your question, but I live in mental health group housing and spend a lot of time with people who have been institutionalized in some way, at some point in their life, including jail and prison. An interesting thing I learned in the past year is that even though I have never spent time in jail or prison, I still know the jailhouse version of spades. And in case you wanted to know, people were willing to fuck up others over card games, including spades according to a lot of people who played spades or learned how to in jail or prison, that I've learned how to play spades from and played with. Story 17. Prison is what you make it. If you are being bullied and fear for your life, you can lock down in ADSEG and not deal with anyone. When there is a fight, COs move the people off the yard and spirate them. I spent my time reading non-fiction, learning a foreign language, and working out. In the 5 years, I never had a single fight. I figured if I was going to be here, might as well have something to show for it. Prison isn't fun, but it's a life experience. And in some sense, I'm glad I saw it, so that I had the experience and could even relate it to others, like I am doing now. Story 18. It is indeed a life experience. I spent 15 months in federal detention. I got moved 12 times in 15 months. Never prison, which meant I couldn't get halfway house or home confinement, which everyone said I would get. I took 2 trips to the OKCFTC. I usually spent my time in segregation due to my mental health. Couldn't look people in the face. Was also told I would need a big knife because of my argumentative attitude. The racial separation was notable. Black dude and Hispanic guy get into a fight. Near race war. Goddamn politics. I remember feeling guilty seeing the person who gave me stuff when I first showed up to one detention, not able to thank him properly, besides paying him back. Everyone offered coffee and I don't drink coffee. A psychologist saying gifts are bad if they mount up drastically with no return. Then they ask you to hide their illegal alcohol. I remember giving this one dude a long hug, understanding that it can improve mental health. I noticed the dude was more chill, but it wore off. Not sure how to convince inmates that long hugs can be emotional, beneficial, and calming without seeming gay. Story 19. Some prisons let you study for a GED or take classes to get a degree. Some even let you do volunteer work, rehabilitating animals or something else outside the fence to pass the time, and it can potentially lessen your sentence depending, of course, of the severity of your sentence. Being isolated from the rest of society can be taxing on you psychologically, so the best thing you could do is just find ways to keep your brain active, and exercise definitely helps. Get the endorphins going. Story 20. You have to be ready to seriously hurt another person over something petty. Hey, I just caught you going through my basket. You took my ink pen without asking permission first. Now I have to try to beat you to fucking death. If I don't try to kill you for that. Everyone is going to think I'm a bitch and every penny I spend on commissary is going to be stolen. Story 21. In my country, a third world in short, poor F. It's disgusting. And you don't get free food. Everything inside is paid. Tattoos, haircuts, etc. Dirty F. Police force abuse. Overpopulation. When I say overpopulation, I mean 100 prisoners in a 20-person cell. No air conditioners. Only police officers can have that. Imagine being inside with 90-plus inmates with no fucking cool air. Yeah, just like hell. Story 22. In jail, my favorite cellie was a guy on murder charges. I never felt any concern around him. He was just a young gang guy, and at that point, it's kinda 50-50 whether somebody ends up calling you the victim or the suspect. The cellie that I almost got into a fight with was a guy who was partly there for child support. He had like 57 children with 38 different women and couldn't understand why he was supposed to support them all. Looking after his many children was just so unfair for him. He was also involved in the meth business, so he probably really did have the money for all of them too. Story 23. About prison gangs. The gangs aren't seeking people out or coercing people to join them. There is no short supply of dumb fucking thug wannabes who are willing to do whatever they can to join a gang because they don't know what actually being in a gang entails. Hint, it's a lot. There are perks, but the path to earning your respect and being known as a solid member of a gang is not worth all the shit you have to deal with, inside and out. The gang code is insane and basically built to just benefit the leaders of the gangs. It can vary a lot from one inmate to the next. I was gang affiliated and it led to a rather violent sentence, but I got lucky and avoided death and extra time and got out under 5 years. Thankful I went though, helped to make me the man I am today. Story 24. There is a huge difference between jail, pre-conviction, and prison post-conviction. By the letter of the law, everyone in jail who has yet to be convicted is innocent, yet jail is 100 times worse than prison. In prison, you can carve out a decent life. In jail, while you are still technically innocent, you are treated in an inhumane manner. It's impossible to maintain proper hygiene, and it's insanely expensive. On the street, one ramen noodle is 10 cents in prison. They are 25 cents, yet in jail, I've paid $1.25. In California, jail you are given 1 pair of briefs, 1 pair of socks. They change them twice a week. If you go out to yard in the evening and you got new briefs that morning, you are forced to wear dirty socks and briefs for days. 75% of inmates in both jail and prison are in there either directly or indirectly for drugs. Period. Every institution, jail or prison has a place where guards can take an inmate and do whatever they want to them where there are no cameras, track witnesses. If you are ever mistreated as an inmate, your only recourse is to notify a colleague of the staff member that wronged you and pray they aren't personal friends with each other. The criminal justice system in every large city is designed and dependent upon plea bargains regardless of guilt or innocence. We are allegedly innocent until proven guilty, but unless you are wealthy and can pay for bond and lawyers, you are 100% guilty until proven innocent. The Constitution is ignored. While awaiting trial, inmates are routinely threatened with a more severe punishment if they choose to go to trial while offered a lighter sentence if they agree to plead guilty. Why are judges and prosecutors allowed to give someone a stiffer punishment simply because they exercised their right to a trial, because they refuse to admit guilt? You are accused of a crime that you didn't do. You are in jail, and the judge says, plead guilty today, I'll give you 1 year. If you take it to trial and lose, I'm going to give you 6 years instead. What do? I didn't even mention that you may sit in jail for a year before your case even goes to trial. The criminal justice system in ITA entirety is unconstitutional. It is a privatized business that makes wealthy people a lot of money. Story 25. County versus state versus federal. Very different. The one thing I can tell you about federal, the staff and guards are some of the laziest, dumbest assholes I've ever come across in my close to 50 years of life. They make the prisons a lot worse than they need to be. Story 26. Former corrections officer here. There are significantly more weapons hidden in the pod than you think. Craziest thing I found was a crossbow made from underwear elastic and chow trays. Inmate dipped the bolt in shit. Actual human shit. And shot it at another inmate. Story 27. Got to go outside, play volleyball, basketball, work out, run laps up until the lights came on to indicate curfew. Got to sleep all day. Only had to get up at 4 a.m. for breakfast and the 6 p.m. for dinner. Lunch they served in the cells. Story 28. When I was in prison in 1947, there was this inmate named Ellis Boyd Red Redding, and he could smuggle almost anything in the prison. There was also a guy named Andy, and he dug out through a poster-covered wall. I worked on a roof with them, and they gave me beer. Story 29. A guy I knew described it as, imagine hanging out all day with people you don't want to hang out with, watching TV shows you don't want to watch, and then eating shitty food, again, with people you don't want to eat with. Story 30. Went to juvenile detention when I was 15 for a year and a half. Prefer not to explain. It was pretty much like Orange is the New Black. Dorms, pretty decent freedom, and we had the option of having a job or not. Pretty surprised how lax it was. I live in Canada, so maybe that's why.